Hi, my name's Rowan, and for most of my life, I believed my mother died the day I was born. That lie was carefully planted by the man who raised me, a man I called Dad for 30 years. But last month, a maid I'd never seen pointed at an old photo on my wall and whispered, "Sir, that boy, he lived with me at the orphanage." That moment, it shattered everything, because it meant someone had stolen my past, and whoever did it was still watching me. But the truth I uncovered next, it didn't just change my life, it nearly got me killed. The late afternoon light in my living room had that soft, hazy warmth Houston gets before sunset. I'd just wrapped up a remote project for a logistics company and was sorting through mail when Helena Cross, the new housekeeper, moved quietly around the room with a duster in hand. Mondays were usually uneventful for me, predictable, controlled. I liked it that way. My name is Rowan Creed. I'm the youngest son in a family where being the youngest mostly meant being spoken over or forgotten entirely. I'm in my late 30s now, working as an independent IT contractor, and I bought this small place in a Houston suburb after years of saving. It isn't flashy, but it's mine. A place where the noise of my childhood can't reach me unless I let it. Still, old habits don't disappear. That quiet tension, the feeling of always needing to stay agreeable, hangs in the background. Grant, my older brother, would call it being too sensitive, but he wasn't the one always walking around someone else's version of the truth. I learned early that pushing back wasn't worth the trouble. I was thinking about whether to cook dinner or order something when I noticed Helena pause by the framed photo on the wall. It was an image I'd had for as long as I could remember. A little boy standing in a sunlit yard, wearing a small uniform shirt with a mint green button. I'd always assumed the photo was tucked into the belongings given to me the day I was adopted. It didn't mean anything specific, just one of those mysterious items you accept because nobody in your family seems eager to clarify anything. Helena leaned closer. Her hand trembled. I'd never seen her react to anything in my house before. She was usually steady, discreet, focused. "Sir, that boy," her voice cracked. "He lived with me at the orphanage." I froze. The air felt thinner somehow, like someone had opened a door in the past that was supposed to stay sealed. "What?" The words slipped out quiet, not sharp, but full of disbelief. "That's impossible." She didn't step away. Her eyes stayed glued to the photo, widening with something like recognition mixed with fear, like she'd spoken too fast and wished she could take it back. "I shouldn't have said it," she murmured, "but I need to look at it again." I walked toward her, careful with my steps, even though my heartbeat wasn't nearly as calm. She lifted the frame, studying the picture as if it held a truth neither of us was ready for. I watched her expression change, slowly, painfully. Her finger hovered over a detail I'd never paid much attention to, the tiny mint green button on the boy's shirt. "That," she whispered, "was part of the Elmwood Orphanage uniform, Dallas area. I sewed those buttons for the littlest ones." My stomach tightened. On a shelf nearby was a small keepsake box containing a real mint green button, one I'd carried since childhood. The story I'd been told? That it was from a shirt I wore as a toddler in a private foster placement. Nothing official, nothing institutional. That button had been one of the only proofs of where I came from, and now it meant something entirely different. Helena glanced at the box. Only Elmwood used that color, only for the smallest children. Her voice wasn't loud. The quietness of it made the impact deeper, devastating in a way I hadn't expected. I cleared my throat, trying to anchor myself. My family told me I wasn't in an orphanage. They said I was in a private placement, that everything was handled between families. She looked at me with a sad, careful expression, not pity, more like genuine concern. Sometimes families simplify stories, especially when they think a child won't remember. I felt myself retreat inward, something old pressing against my ribs. Grant always hated when I asked questions about my early years. "Leave it alone, Rowan," he'd say. "You make things harder than they need to be." I'd learned to stop asking, learned that peace meant silence. Helena held the frame a moment longer before setting it back on the wall. "Maybe it's nothing," she said softly. "But if that boy is who I think he is, someone has been hiding something from you for a very long time." She gathered her things, apologizing for staying late. After she stepped out the door, the house went quiet. So quiet, I could hear the hum of the AC and my own breathing shifting in uneven waves. I walked to the shelf and opened the little box. The button sat there, unmoving, innocent, but suddenly heavy with meaning. I compared its color to the one in the photo, an exact match. For the first time in my life, I didn't know whose history I was holding. The sun dipped lower outside, casting a deeper shade across the room. I stood there, clutching the box, staring at the photo that had just turned my past inside out. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I suddenly wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. I didn't move for a while. The sky outside had dimmed into that soft orange wash that usually comforted me, but now it just made the walls feel closer, tighter. I sat there on the edge of the couch, the photo frame beside me, the small mint green button cradled in my palm like it held weight. Maybe it did. I kept staring at the face in the photo. That child. That boy. That's not me. But if it wasn't, why did my chest tighten like it was? I set the button down carefully on the coffee table. My fingers didn't feel like mine. They always told me I came from a foster family in Waco, that I'd never lived in an orphanage, not even briefly. I was adopted at 4. I don't remember the faces of that time, but I remember being told over and over, "You were one of the lucky ones, Rowan. We chose you." Now that felt poisoned. My family always had this way of wrapping hard truths in warm tones. Not lying exactly, just smoothing out the wrinkles until you stopped noticing the fabric didn't fit. But if they'd lied about where I came from, what else had they hidden? I grabbed my phone. I thought about calling Grant. I even opened his contact. And then I imagined his voice, sharp, impatient, just like when I asked questions he didn't want to deal with. "Rowan, why dig this up now? It doesn't change anything." And he'd say it like he meant well. But I'd be the one made to feel like the problem for even wondering. I put the phone down. Instead, I went to the hallway closet and pulled down the old file box. The one with all the important papers that rarely saw daylight. Tax forms, insurance documents, my adoption packet. I sat cross-legged on the rug, flipping through it slowly, as if the truth might bite. There it was, a thin folder with my name written in my dad's handwriting, Rowan C. Nothing fancy, just enough to claim something had been done properly. I flipped it open. Some basic details, names, dates, a notarized form or two. But something caught my eye on the second page. The pagination skipped. Page 2, then 4. I checked the staples. Nothing had been removed. It was just missing. Then I saw the date gap. My transfer date to the Creed family was early November, but the date on the intake form from the prior family? August, 3 months. No explanation. Then I saw it, near the bottom of a page, transferred from temporary care facility. The facility name was blacked out, not scribbled or covered, blacked out with professional ink. My heart didn't race exactly. It just stopped pretending to be calm. Why would they block out the name, unless it mattered? Suddenly, I remembered something I hadn't thought of in decades. I was small, maybe 3? I don't know. Standing barefoot in a hallway. Dim light. The walls echoing with muffled cries from behind a door. Children. I'd always told myself it was a dream. The kind kids have after watching too many cartoons. But now it landed differently. Was that Elmwood? I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to think straight. My mind wouldn't stop folding in on itself. I wasn't sure what scared me more. The idea that my family lied, or that I'd let myself believe them so easily. A phrase I hadn't heard in years pushed its way to the front. You were lucky we took you in, Rowan. Don't go looking for trouble. Grant, I was maybe 12 when he said it. I'd asked why I didn't have baby pictures like he did. He'd shrugged, smiled that smug older brother smile, and tossed me a football like that was the end of the conversation. I'd forgotten about that line. But now it sounded less like a brotherly jab and more like a warning. I stood and paced the room, then stopped at the photo again. If she recognized him, then she recognized me. I should have been tired by now. The light outside had faded to dusk, and the sounds of the neighborhood were soft. Distant dogs barking, sprinklers clicking on across the street. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, drank half of it without tasting it. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but I knew I had to talk to Grant. Not over the phone, in person. I needed to see his face when I asked the questions. Back in the living room, I took the photo off the wall, set it next to the button on my desk. Side by side, they didn't look like much. But to me, they were the crack in the glass. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I turned off the lights and headed to the bedroom. Just as I pulled the covers back, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. One message. Stop asking questions about where you came from. I stood there, staring at the screen, my hand still hovering over the phone. Only one person had said anything to me about my past today. Helena. But that wasn't her tone. That wasn't her language. No, this was someone else. Someone who already knew what I was about to do. That thought stayed with me through the night. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, that message glowed behind my eyelids, like someone whispering a warning straight into my ear. By morning, the unease had hardened into something sharper. I needed answers, and the only place to start was Grant. The drive across town felt longer than usual. Houston traffic was steady, not too heavy, but enough to keep my mind from drifting too far. I kept replaying what I'd ask him, how I'd say it without sounding like the scared kid he used to talk over. The closer I got to River Oaks, the more I felt that old knot tightening in my stomach. I pulled up outside his place a little before noon. His home looked exactly like the man he'd grown into, structured, polished, expensive, but cold. I sat there a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I told myself I didn't come for a fight. I came for the truth. I walked up the path, and before I even knocked fully, the door swung open. Grant stood there, jaw set, eyes already narrowed. "You couldn't call first?" he asked, like I'd disrupted something precious. I ignored the sting in his tone. "Can we talk?" He crossed his arms, filling the doorway like a barrier. Same posture he always used when he wanted me to back down. But today, I stepped past him into the foyer, refusing to shrink into the version of myself he preferred. He shut the door with a sharper click than usual. "You're being dramatic, Rowan," I turned to him. "I just want to understand something. That's all." His expression tightened. "What now?" I took a slow breath. "My adoption paperwork. Some of it doesn't add up." He let out a low sigh, like dealing with a stubborn child. "I told you years ago, the paperwork wasn't perfect. You were lucky we even found you." There it was again. Lucky. He always used that word like it should silence me. "Where was I before the adoption?" I asked. He glanced away, just for a heartbeat. "Why dig into that? We gave you a life. Isn't that enough?" His tone wasn't angry. It was condescending. That hurt more than outright shouting ever could. I didn't back down. Helena recognized the boy in that photo. That got him, barely a second, maybe less. His eyes went wide, but he masked it quickly. "Never heard of her," he said too fast. "I didn't say you had." I watched his face carefully. "And she mentioned Elmwood." He froze again. Not long, but long enough. Then, "I don't know that place." But he did. I could see it. "If you didn't know it," I said quietly, "why react like that?" He stepped closer, voice harder. "Rowan, you're reading into things. You do this. You always jump to conclusions." Before I could answer, he ran a hand through his hair, then muttered, almost to himself, "That woman should have never let you wander." I straightened. "What woman?" He realized instantly what he'd said. Silence sealed his lips. The air thickened. "Are you talking about a foster mother?" I pressed. "Or someone from Elmwood?" He didn't answer. He spun around and headed toward his office. I followed, stopping in the doorway as he reached for a drawer behind his desk. It was locked. A small metal label on the front read, "R.A. Pre-Adoption." My initials. "Open it," I said. "No." His voice had an edge I hadn't heard in years. "Drop it, Rowan. Some things are better buried." "Buried for who?" I asked. "Me or you?" His face reddened and something in his jaw twitched. This wasn't irritation. This was fear. He didn't want me going further. Not because it would hurt me, but because it would expose him. That realization landed like a punch I didn't see coming. "I'm done being kept in the dark," I said quietly. I walked out. He didn't try to stop me. Not with his hands. Only his voice followed me down the hallway. "You don't know what you're digging into." I didn't turn back. Outside, the sunlight felt too bright. I made it to my truck, opened the door, sat down, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the truth settling in my bones. If Grant wasn't hiding anything, he wouldn't have reacted that way. I started the engine. Then someone tapped on the window. I jumped, turning quickly. Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor, was standing there. Small, silver-haired, leaning in just enough for me to lower the window. She looked around before speaking. "If you're asking about your past, be careful." My pulse kicked. "Why?" I asked. She hesitated, glancing toward Grant's home. Then she whispered, "The last time you did, your father threatened that social worker." I stared at her. "I asked before?" My voice felt thin. "When?" She swallowed. "You were a child, dear. A very frightened one." Her next words shattered everything I thought I knew. "You were just a little boy when they dragged you away screaming," she said softly. I stared at Mrs. Henderson, my mouth dry, every part of me suddenly alert. "Dragged me?" She nodded, her voice trembling with memory. You were maybe 7. I remember it because I'd never seen a child cry like that. You were holding on to a woman. She had dark hair, pale skin. She kept calling you baby even as they were pulling you away. And you were screaming her name. I couldn't breathe. What name? She squinted. Lena? Maybe Alina? Something like that. But the man with you. Your father, I assumed. He was yelling at her, told her to sign the papers and get out. I looked at the street, the sidewalk I just walked down. I'd lived in this version of my life for decades. It had always started at age 9 in Grant's home, quiet and structured. But this was something else, something ugly, hidden in plain sight. My earliest memory, I murmured, is a Christmas tree, 9 years old, a blue ornament. That's it. Sweetheart, Mrs. Henderson said gently, you had a whole life before that. I thanked her and walked back to my truck in a haze. The door shut, and I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. The truth wasn't buried, it had been overwritten. A sudden image flickered across my brain, a woman's hand trembling as she zipped up a worn coat, my own voice, higher-pitched, panicked, someone shouting my name from far away, sharp, angry. I squeezed my eyes shut. Was it a memory? Or something my brain stitched together from what I just heard? I turned the key and started the engine. 10 minutes later, I was downtown, parking outside the Public Records building. The sun had started dipping behind the skyline, shadows stretching long across the street. I walked in, the air conditioning cutting through the heat still trapped on my skin. At the records desk, a middle-aged clerk in glasses glanced up. I need to request adoption-related files, I said. My name is Rowan Adler. She typed for a few seconds, squinting at her monitor. 1 moment, please. She stepped away, returned with a manila envelope, and set it gently on the desk. There's a partial file available. The rest has been sealed due to historical irregularities. That word, irregularities, hung in the air like smoke. Can I see it? I asked. She slid it across. I moved to a nearby bench and opened it carefully. Most of the pages were redacted. Thick black bars slicing through names, dates, notes. The previous guardian section? Blotted out. Custody transfer? Blacked out. Even an incident report from the week of my adoption was entirely unreadable. But one thing caught my eye. A name. My name. Rowan L. Just that. The L wasn't Adler. L, I whispered. L as in who? I flipped the page over, but there was nothing. No clue what. The rest of the name was, or why it had been cut off. My hands trembled as I folded the file closed, trying to process it all. The clerk cleared her throat gently behind me. There was one more note, she said, stepping closer. A woman once filed an appeal on your case. I turned to her. What woman? She checked the screen again. Carlene Voss. She was a social worker at the time. Filed a report, claimed coercion may have been involved. But she withdrew the complaint weeks later. No explanation. Did she say anything else? The clerk shook her head. She moved. Left Houston, relocated to Waco. That's all I know. I nodded, thanking her, and left the building. The sunlight had faded, and the city was dipped in golden haze. As I got back into my truck, everything inside me felt fragile, like glass under pressure. Waco. Should I drive there tonight? Confront her? No, not yet. I needed more than fragments and redacted files. I needed something solid. But deep down, I already knew. This woman, this Carlene Voss, might be the only person who remembered who I really was. Back home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the driveway, engine off, watching the dim light spill across the dashboard. My hands rested in my lap, but they were still shaking. What else did he take from me? I thought about Grant's words. Some things are better buried. And now I understood. They didn't bury a truth. They buried a person. Me. I finally stepped out and walked slowly to the door, keys clutched tightly. The sky was fully dark now, the neighborhood quiet. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown Texas number. I answered. Hello? A voice on the other end, soft, shaky, unmistakably a woman's. Rowan, they told me you stopped looking. Is that true? My legs froze. She continued, voice thinner now. It's Carlene Voss. I've been waiting 20 years for you to call. She continued, voice thinner now. It's Carlene Voss. I've been waiting 20 years for you to call. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. My knees buckled slightly, and I grabbed the kitchen counter to steady myself. You were never abandoned, Rowan, she said softly. You were taken. I didn't speak. Couldn't. The words echoed and rang through me like a cracked bell. Not abandoned. Taken. I tried to stop it. I tried to keep you with your guardian, but they threatened my job. They threatened more than that. I leaned back against the fridge, my breath shallow. My other hand clutched at my side, as if holding something invisible together inside me. Why? Was all I managed to ask. They didn't want her to have rights. She wasn't your biological mother, but she raised you. And someone decided that wasn't good enough. I filed an appeal, but it disappeared just like I did. She paused. I can't explain it all over the phone. Not safely. I live outside Waco now. Come tomorrow. Please. I said yes. When the call ended, I didn't move. I slid down to the kitchen floor, my back still against the cabinet, and stared into nothing. My body sat still, but my thoughts spiraled in every direction. Taken. Had my whole life been shaped by a theft? I dug through my memories, trying to find some crack, some evidence. But it was like chasing ghosts in fog. The years before age 9 were fragmented. A few sounds. The smell of smoke. A voice calling me Rue. That's all. I didn't know how long I sat there. Minutes? Maybe more. The grief crept in slowly, not loud, but heavy, like wet cement over my chest. Finally, I forced myself up, grabbed a bag from the closet, tossed in a few clothes, and locked up the house. I climbed into my truck and headed toward the freeway, northbound, Waco. The sun had set. Red light gave way to gray, then full darkness. Highway signs zipped past, unreadable through the blur of my focus. I turned the air up and cracked the window, needing something to keep me present. Memories of Grant drifted in, not as a brother, but as a warden. How he spoke for me at school. How he tossed out old toys I'd said I didn't remember. How he always changed the subject when I asked about my early years. Did you ever love me? I whispered, eyes on the road. Or was I just something you won? About an hour into the drive, I stopped at a gas station just past Madisonville. I filled the tank, grabbed a bottle of water, then slid into the driver's seat. On impulse, I opened the glove box, searching for napkins, and found something else. A photo. Old, curled at the edges. I stared at it. A boy, me, maybe 6 or 7. Puffy eyes, cheeks blotchy from crying. Holding the hand of a woman who wasn't Grant. She knelt beside me, her dark hair tangled by wind, one arm protectively around my back. I couldn't remember her. Not her voice. Not her name. But the way I was holding her, that was no stranger's grip. I turned the photo over. in faded blue ink. My Rowan, hold my hand tight. My throat tightened. I rested my head on the steering wheel, eyes stinging. Everything I believed was unraveling. I had trusted Grant, loved him, even in the silence. I let him shape my life, let him name me, raise me, control me. I never fought it, never thought to. I let him tell me who I was, I whispered, and I believed him. I sat there for a long time, unsure if I should keep driving. A cowardly part of me wanted to turn back, stay in the life I knew, however false it now felt. Maybe the truth would hurt more. Maybe there was a reason it was buried. Then my phone buzzed. A text. No name. Stop looking. You're going to destroy everything he built for you. I stared, heart pounding. A second message followed. Ask yourself why your father had the drawer labeled with your initials. I froze. Whoever this was, they knew about the drawer in Grant's office. The one labeled RA pre-adoption. That wasn't public. No one but Grant and I had been in that room, unless someone else had been watching. Suddenly, my sadness turned to something sharper. My grief caught fire and became rage. They were scared. That meant I was close. I wiped my face, started the engine again, and said aloud into the dark cab of my truck, "If they're watching me, then they're afraid of what I'll find." I looked at the photo once more before sliding it into my jacket pocket. I deserved to know who held my hand. I deserved to know my real name. The road stretched on, a silver ribbon under my headlights. Just outside of Waco, I pulled into a small roadside diner that Carlene had described. White stucco, chipped trim, flickering neon sign. Half a dozen trucks in the lot. Inside, the place was quiet. A few couples. One man reading a newspaper. And in a booth near the window, a woman in her 60s clutched a folder like it might disappear. Our eyes met. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just stared. I walked toward her slowly. As I reached the booth, she whispered, "He told me you'd forget everything. But you remembered her face, didn't you?" I stopped cold. How did she know what I remembered? Carlene was already pushing the folder across the table toward me. Her hands trembled like they'd been doing that for years. Her eyes searched mine. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "Your real name wasn't Rowan. And Grant knew it the whole time." I sank into the booth across from her. The diner around us buzzed with low conversation and clinking silverware, but it all fell away. The folder sat between us like it was ticking. "Your name was Rowan Leland," she said gently. "And your guardian. She was your mother's sister, your aunt. You lived with her for 3 years. She never wanted to let you go." I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry, my mind in freefall. Carlene looked down. "They said she was unstable, unsafe, but I visited that home. I saw it myself. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe. You were safe." She paused and pressed her palms flat against the table, like bracing for impact. Then CPS received an anonymous complaint. A judge got involved. The next week, your aunt was served emergency guardianship papers. I stared at her. "Anonymous?" I asked. She nodded. "The complaint came from someone inside the system, someone with influence, someone like your brother." The word brother scraped my chest raw. "Grant pushed it through," she said. "He had contacts. He told your aunt to sign or lose everything. I submitted a formal complaint. He found out, called me at home, told me if I didn't drop it, he'd make sure I never worked again, that he'd ruin her and me." My voice was quiet. "He didn't save me. He erased me." She reached for the folder again. "Look." I opened it. Inside were a few copies of old court documents, social worker notes, and photos, some color, some black and white. One showed me, about 5 years old, sitting on a porch beside a woman I didn't recognize, but the way she held me said everything. Another photo, more recent, was a group shot from an orphanage. My eyes snapped to one familiar face, Helena, younger, wearing a pale blue uniform, holding me on her hip like I weighed nothing. Carlene watched my face. You were only at that orphanage for a week. Your aunt was trying to get you back. She thought placing you there temporarily would protect you while she fought in court. I whispered, "Why would he do this? Why go through all that?" Carlene hesitated. She looked afraid to say it. Then softly, "Grant wanted a child. Not to raise, not to love, to shape." Her voice lowered again. "He chose you because you were quiet, because you didn't fight, because he thought he could control you." I shoved the folder closed and pushed back from the booth. My stomach twisted. I needed air. I pushed through the diner door and stepped into the parking lot, sucking in the cold night air like it might stop my chest from caving in. That's when I saw him. A man leaned against the hood of a dark car across the lot. Black jacket, arms folded, watching. I took a step back. "You're stirring up old trouble, kid," he called. His voice was calm, not threatening, too calm for that, like he knew I'd listen. "What do you want?" I asked. "Not me," he said, pushing off the car. "But Grant, he doesn't like people poking around. Walk away." I reached for my phone, but before I could raise it, the man turned and slipped behind a parked truck. A moment later, an engine roared and taillights disappeared down the road. Carlene rushed out behind me. She looked pale. "That's one of his men. They used to follow me. 20 years, and I never stopped checking my rearview mirror." I got into my truck and slammed the door, heart pounding. I tried calling Grant. No answer. Again, voicemail. I muttered, "If he's threatening people again, what else is he hiding?" Carlene walked to my window. "There's more. Records, letters, but I can't give them here. Too risky." She wrote her address on a napkin and handed it to me. "Come tomorrow morning," she said. "I'll have everything ready." I nodded and watched her walk back inside, clutching her coat like armor. The road back toward Houston felt longer. The Texas night wrapped around me, and my headlights cut through it like a blade. I gripped the steering wheel harder than I needed to, trying to steady the chaos inside. Grant's voice echoed in my head. "Don't go digging into what's been buried." He hadn't raised me. He'd shaped me, molded me like clay until I didn't even recognize the child I used to be. He'd told me who to be, what to feel, when to be grateful, and when to shut up. But not anymore. That fire inside me, the one he spent years keeping small, wasn't small now. It burned through my chest, through the fear, through the doubt. I wasn't waiting until morning. I turned off the highway, taking the route toward the office complex where Grant kept his law practice. The building sat dark, tucked behind a row of cypress trees, but as I pulled into the lot, my headlights caught something strange. The front door was cracked open. I killed the engine and stepped out slowly, listening. The glass door creaked as I pushed it wider. No alarm, no security lights. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of cologne and paper. I moved down it, heart hammering. When I reached Grant's office, I saw the light already on. And there, behind the desk, the drawer labeled RA Pre-Adoption was pulled halfway open. The drawer was empty. Every document about my past was gone. Just metal rails and dust where my life had once been stored. The only thing left behind was a single, empty file sleeve. Its label, written in fading marker, read, R. Leland, intake. I stood there, breathing hard, my hands clenched at my sides. He knew I was coming. Someone had cleared this out before I got here. Not hours ago, minutes. The drawer still had warmth to the touch, like it had just been rifled through. I scanned the room. The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting long shadows against the walls. Papers were scattered across the desk, some half crumpled, a few torn like someone had been in a rush. One of the lower cabinet doors hung slightly open, its lock scratched up like someone had pried it with something sharp. My stomach tightened. This wasn't Grant being careful. This was someone else, sloppy, fast, panicked. A noise, faint, distant. A door closing somewhere down the hallway. I froze. I didn't call out this time. I didn't move. I just listened. But nothing followed. Only silence again. They're not just hiding the past. They're hiding the crime. My eyes drifted toward Grant's leather chair. And then I saw it. An envelope. My name scrawled across the front in thick black marker. Inside was a single photo. Me, age 7. The same image I found in my glove box. Puffy cheeks, red eyes, clutching a woman's hand. But this time, someone had drawn a thick red line across my mouth. Below it, in the same red ink, "Stay quiet." I sat down slowly, the envelope still in my hand, as the weight of everything hit me at once. Whoever had followed me from Waco wasn't just watching. They were ahead of me now, waiting, erasing. They knew what I was after, and they were ready to scare me back into the dark. But fear wasn't what I felt. Not anymore. I slammed the envelope onto Grant's desk, my voice echoing in the empty office as I shouted, "You think this will stop me?" My chest rose and fell in deep, ragged breaths. Years, decades of obedience, of silence, of pretending to be grateful for the scraps of a life that wasn't mine. All of it broke apart in that room. He'd taken everything, and I had let him. "I'm done letting you write my story," I whispered. I grabbed the envelope and stormed out. The night air outside hit me like a slap. I headed toward my truck, my boots crunching the gravel beneath me. Footsteps, behind me, close. I spun around. A figure ducked behind a parked SUV across the lot. "Hey," I called. "Come out." Nothing. I reached the truck and jumped in, locking the doors as my heartbeat spiked. That's when the headlights behind me flicked on. A black SUV pulled out from the shadows and tore off down the street, tires screeching. Whoever it was, they wanted me to know they were watching. They weren't trying to hide. They were trying to rattle me. And for a second, it worked. Then, my phone rang. Grant's name lit up the screen. I stared at it. My jaw tightened. I answered. His voice was calm, too calm. "Son," he said, "I heard you've been troubled." I didn't give him a second. "Stop calling me that." He chuckled lightly. "You've always had a curious streak. But curiosity can be dangerous. You're not equipped to understand everything that happened." "Then explain it," I snapped. He paused, just enough to remind me who held the power. Then he hung up. It wasn't a call to talk. It was a warning, a reminder, a threat. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and started the engine. I didn't even realize I'd been gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The drive home felt like a blur. Taillights, traffic signals, empty stretches of highway that bent into the night. But my mind wasn't foggy anymore. I was clear in a way I hadn't felt since I started this. He thinks I'll run. He thinks I'll fold. No. I'd gather everything I needed. I'd find the truth myself. And I'd do it with people he couldn't touch. People like Helena. She was the only one left who remembered who I was before Grant got his hands on me. I pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, and sat there under the porch light for a moment, trying to steady my thoughts. Then I picked up the phone. She answered after the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Rowan?" "I found the office," I said quietly. The drawer was empty. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "Rowan," she whispered. "They've started again." "What do you mean?" She hesitated. Then her voice trembled. "Someone came to my apartment 3 weeks ago. A man. Said he was doing research. Asked questions about you. About your childhood. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to scare you off this. But now..." I closed my eyes. "Grant's been cleaning house for months." She didn't deny it. "Helena," I said, voice lower, "I need everything you remember. Everything you've ever hidden from me." There was a pause on the other end. Then she said, "There's one thing I never told you." My breath caught. She continued, voice even softer now. "The woman in that photo, the one holding your hand." I held the phone tighter. "She wasn't your aunt." Silence stretched. "She was your mother." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat closed up, my jaw locked, and all I could do was sit there on the edge of the bed, gripping the phone like it was the only solid thing left in a world that had just fallen out from under me. Then Helena whispered something else, something that cracked open the last piece of me I'd been holding together. "Your mother didn't die, Rowan. She was taken too." The room spun. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to ground myself. "Taken?" I whispered. "What do you mean, taken?" Helena's voice trembled. "They moved her, just days after you arrived. She didn't die in childbirth. That was never true." She paused, and I could hear her breathing. "They said she wasn't stable, but she wasn't dangerous, Rowan. She loved you. She begged for you. Begged." I stared at the floor. Suddenly, I wasn't a man in his 30s. I was a boy again, sitting at the edge of a metal-framed cot in a state facility, wondering why no one ever came for me, wondering why I wasn't enough to keep. It had always hurt, but now it bled. "Rosalie," Helena said. That was her name, Rosalie Leland. I repeated it in my head. Rosalie. She wasn't a ghost. She was real. She had a name, a voice, and maybe she was still out there. "Rowan," Helena continued, "there's something else. Years ago, I saw a file, restricted access. It was labeled Patient Transfer, Leland, Rosalie. I only glimpsed it once, but I never forgot. That name again. Rosalie. Each time I heard it, it hit deeper. I stood up slowly and grabbed my keys from the nightstand. "I'm coming over," I told her. "It's late," she said gently. "You don't have to." "No," I cut her off. "I do. I need the rest. I can't sleep knowing this." The drive across town was quiet. The streets were nearly empty, the glow of streetlights bouncing off the wet pavement from a passing rain. My hands shook on the steering wheel the whole way. When I got to Helena's building, she was already at the door, robe tied tight, eyes rimmed with worry. She stepped aside to let me in and led me to her small kitchen table. There, she placed a worn shoebox down gently, like it held bones. "I kept some things," she said softly. "I never knew if I'd see you again, but I couldn't bring myself to throw them out." Inside were scraps. Fragments of a childhood no one had told me belonged to me. A cloth patch with my old ID number from the orphanage. A half-torn corner of what looked like a medical intake form. Faded ink. But the name was clear. Rosalie Leland. And then, a Polaroid. My breath caught. It was her. She was young, tired, and beautiful in a worn-down kind of way. And she was holding a baby, me. I reached for the photo with both hands. She held me, I said, barely hearing myself. She actually held me. No one had ever shown me proof like this. Not Grant. Not any file. Not any photo album. This wasn't a story someone told me. This was real. I didn't cry loudly. There were no sobs. Just the weight of it all sinking down, pulling my shoulders in, my chest hollowing out. Decades of lies. And here was the proof, tucked in a shoebox. Helena reached into the box again. "There's more," she said, picking up an envelope she'd placed inside. She opened it, and her eyes widened. It was empty. "What?" she muttered, turning it upside down. "No, I swear, Rowan. There was a transfer record. I put it in here myself, just last month." My stomach twisted. She began rummaging through the box, pulling papers out with shaking hands. It was here. It said where they sent her. I wouldn't have imagined that. I stood slowly. The pieces were rearranging in my head again, faster now, sharper. "Someone's been here," I said quietly. Helena froze. "They didn't take everything," I continued. "Just the one thing that mattered." She nodded slowly, her voice barely audible. "A week ago, there was a man in a black SUV parked across the street. I didn't think much of it, but now, Grant, it had to be." "He knows we're talking," I said. She looked up at me, terrified. "He's still doing it, Rowan. Still watching. Still trying to silence anything that could expose what he did." I clenched my fists. The anger that had been building for days finally settled into something harder, something focused. "He's not covering up a mistake," I said. "He's covering up a crime." And for the first time, I said it aloud. Not just suspicion, truth, cold and clear. I moved toward the front door. "Where's your parking lot?" She pointed out the blinds. I stepped out into the night, walked over to my truck, and knelt down. The gravel bit into my knees as I slid underneath the chassis. There it was, tucked against the back axle. A small rectangular device magnetized to the frame, a GPS tracker. I pulled it off and climbed out, holding it up in the yellow parking light. Helena came to the door. "He's following me," I said. "Every mile." She covered her mouth with both hands. I stepped inside and tossed the device on her kitchen table. "I'm done running, done pretending I owe him anything." "What will you do?" she asked. "I'll find where she went," I said. "I'll find the records he couldn't destroy." Helena looked hesitant, but then nodded slowly. "There's one place that might still have them. The old county records building. They used to keep backup reels, microfilm." I looked at the clock. It was 1:43 a.m. I picked up the shoebox, tucked the photo inside gently. "Let's go." An hour later, we pulled up outside the abandoned county administrative building. It was dark, the kind of darkness that soaked into your skin. The rusted gate was chained, the front door padlocked, but around the side, a window hung broken. Someone had been here before. I boosted, Helena up and followed behind. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and mildew. Shelves sat empty. Filing cabinets rusted shut. Dead computers stared blankly from outdated desks. "This way," Helena whispered, leading me down a hallway that smelled like forgotten years. At the end, we found it. The microfilm archive room. Rows of drawers labeled by year, by name. I pulled one open. Transfer 1983 Leland. There it was. I pulled the reel out, holding it in both hands. My breath trembled. Her name. My mother's name. We turned toward the old viewing machine, the kind I hadn't seen since college libraries. I slid the reel in, heart pounding. And that's when the sound came. A metallic crash from somewhere deeper in the building. Helena jumped. I turned sharply toward the noise. "He found us," I whispered. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and then a voice I hadn't heard in years, but knew too well. A familiar voice echoed through the darkness. "Rowan, you shouldn't have come here." I turned fast, heart pounding in my ears. Stepping into the light of the dusty hallway was a man I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Marlon Hayes, former deputy sheriff and one of the few adults back then who'd ever looked me in the eye like I mattered. He was older now, silver hair messy under his cap, but his eyes still carried that sharp, clear look I remembered. He held up his hands in peace. "Easy, son. I'm not here to stop you." Helena stayed close behind me, whispering, "Is that—" "Yeah," I muttered. "It's Hayes." He stepped closer, glancing around. "Saw your truck. Saw the SUV that's been tailing you, too. That's why I followed. Figured you'd dig deep enough to put yourself in real danger." I swallowed hard. "Why are you here? Why now?" Hayes looked me dead in the eye. "Because Grant isn't who you think he is. He's done this before. Silencing people. Covering tracks. 25 years ago, I tried to blow the whistle on him." My chest tightened. Hayes continued, lowering his voice. "Back when he first started at the orphanage, I got wind of things. Files going missing, kids being transferred with no legal trail, medical paperwork tampered with. I filed a report, and it disappeared. Same as the kids." "Rosalie?" I asked. His eyes darkened. "She was one of them." Helena gripped my arm, urging me back toward the microfilm machine. "We found the reel. It's here." I rushed to the table, slid the reel into place, cranked the dial with trembling fingers. The machine flickered to life, humming softly. There it was. Patient name: Rosalie Leland. Transfer date: August 17th, 1983. Facility: North Lake Psychiatric. Dallas Division condition: postpartum trauma, sedation complications. Recommendation: patient requests infant repeatedly. Transfer to reduce agitation. My throat locked. Below that, small print burned into my brain: authorized by Grant A. Rourke. "He signed it," I whispered. "He sent her away." Helena covered her mouth. Hayes stood silent beside me. "She didn't leave me," I said, my voice cracking. "She was taken." Hayes put a firm hand on my shoulder. "That reel's the truth. But if Grant catches you with it, he'll make sure no one ever sees it." I grabbed the reel and tucked it deep into my jacket. "We're leaving," I said. "Now." The three of us moved quickly, exiting through the side window. As soon as we hit the gravel outside, headlights flared across the lot. The black SUV idled near the main road, engine purring like a waiting predator. Then the driver door opened. Grant stepped out, polished as always. Dark suit, calm expression, but there was something new in his eyes. He wasn't hiding anymore. He called out, voice smooth as oil, "Rowan, you don't need to do this." I stepped forward, feeling Helena and Hayes just behind me. "You were better off not knowing," Grant said. "She was sick. You were abandoned. I saved you." "No," I said flatly. "You stole her from me. You stole me from her." He didn't flinch. "I gave you a life. Without me, you'd still be in that crib, crying for someone who couldn't care for you." My fists clenched. "Without you, maybe she could have held me one more time." Grant's jaw tightened. He took a step toward me. "You're making a mistake, Rowan. That reel, those files, they don't tell the whole story." Before I could respond, he lunged for my coat. But Hayes stepped in fast, drawing a small body cam from his shirt pocket. "You might want to reconsider, Grant," he said calmly. "I've got every word you've said tonight, including your name on that transfer authorization." Grant's face turned pale. In a split second, he turned on Hayes, shoved him hard. I jumped between them, grabbing Grant's arms. We grappled for a moment, his hands clawing for the reel in my jacket, but I held on. Behind us, Helena was already dialing. 911, she shouted. "We need police. We've got a man attacking 2 civilians. There's a witness and a recording." Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Grant froze. The lights approached fast, 2 cruisers this time, red and blue flashing across the dark lot. Minutes later, Grant was in handcuffs, face expressionless. He didn't say another word. Hayes turned to me as the cops drove him off. "You did it, son." But it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. That came the next morning, when Hayes helped me contact the psychiatric care facility still operating in Dallas. The receptionist on the phone hesitated at first, but when Hayes provided the legal request, the voice softened. "Rosalie Leland," she said gently. "Yes, she's here." Hours later, I stood in a quiet wing of a sunlit building. The staff led me into a modest room. A woman sat by the window, her silver hair pulled back in a loose braid. She stared outside at a garden of white lilies. "Rosalie," the nurse said softly, "you have a visitor." She turned slowly. For a moment, I didn't move. Then her eyes, soft, watery, tired, found mine. She studied my face. "You have her eyes," she whispered. And something inside me broke, not with pain, but with release. I didn't sob. I just lowered myself to the chair beside her and took her hand in mine. She didn't pull away. She just held on. Weeks passed. I went back every few days. Sometimes she remembered. Sometimes she didn't. But that didn't matter anymore. Grant was indicted. Charges included evidence tampering, unauthorized transfer, obstruction. His name was no longer on the foundation board, no longer honored in bronze plaques at fundraisers. Just gone. Helena received a formal apology from the Orphanage Trust. Hayes was invited to testify before a state committee. His old report was finally entered into public record. Me? I went home. I framed the Polaroid Helena had saved, the one of Rosalie holding me as a baby. Beside it, I placed a new picture, me holding her hand in that garden room. Our hands looked the same knuckles, same shape, same quiet. 2 photos, 2 lifetimes, 1 story finally complete. I sat by the window one evening, looking at them side by side, and I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. I spent my whole life wondering why no one wanted me. Turns out, she never stopped.